Hello and welcome to another edition of the Professional Hypnotherapist podcast. I'm your host, Aidan Noone. Today we sit down with Peter McLaughlin, a former sales and security company owner turned hypnotherapist and author. Peter takes us on a fascinating journey through his career transition, influenced by his own battles with Lyme disease and leukemia, which led him to explore the profound connection between mind, body and spirit. All of this today and more on the Professional Hypnotherapist podcast. Peter McLaughlin, and thank you for joining me as being my guest today on the Professional Hypnotherapist podcast.
It is my pleasure, Aidan. Glad to be here.
Great. And tell us where you're based at the moment.
In Florida, in a place called Tarpon Springs, Florida. It's about midway down.
Right. I'm sure the weather is fantastic.
It is, although at this time of year it starts getting really hot. And for a person who grew up in the northeast of the United States, it takes getting used to.
Okay, I'm sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the minute in Ireland, it's about 15 degrees centigrade. But anyway, okay, Peter, you weren't always working in the work you're doing as a hypnotherapist coach. Tell us where you started and what you started in.
Wow. Okay. So I started in business, and I was doing business. I was in technology when I first got out of college. At a certain point, I decided I didn't want to be in business anymore. I was in New York City. I quit that, and I became a professional actor for 10 years. I got back into business, but it was my own kind of business at that point. And what brought me into hypnosis was a simultaneous diagnosis, same day, when I was volunteering to be a firefighter, of Lyme disease and a chronic form of leukemia on the same day that led me into this work.
Right. That was a very poignant time in your life, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yes.
So how did you cope with that?
Well, I had my own business at the time. I owned a security guard business, and I had 50 employees. And because of the nature of the business, I was able to put it kind of on autopilot. Yeah. And I would spend about 4 or 5 hours a day just researching, because the hematologist oncologist said, we don't know what causes this kind of leukemia. We don't know how to cure it. And I just spent every day researching. Yeah. And the more I did this, the more I was drawn from the purely physical cause and effect into the power of the mind over the body. Yeah. And then from that into the power of the spirit over the mind. And that's when I thought, okay, I need to learn more about this. And hypnosis seemed like the perfect way to do that.
Mm-hmm. I read from your website, and to quote, to discover how powerful our minds are for creating illness, health, despair, love, failure, and success. In other words, it's our mind is responsible for everything, really, isn't it?
I think it is, and I do think that there is this animating force. I don't know if above is the right way to say it. I think it's a human way of saying it, which is fine. But this animating force that you might call a spirit or you might call a soul, that influences the behavior of the mind, along with everything that happens on the physical plane. So for me, the more I've done this work, the more I feel like I've been drawn into that spiritual aspect. Wasn't it Einstein that said, if you want to solve a problem, you can't solve it at the level at which it was created. You have to go up a level. Yeah. And for me, I find that some of what you might even consider the religious ethics and truths of forgiveness and grace is what ultimately solves these thorny problems that we have at a lower level with our relationships, for example, or for the way we view ourselves. And so my practice, I think, is ultimately dedicated towards finding the deeper reasons why a person is having the symptoms that they're having and resolving that.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm getting from you is that to get to the root cause of the issue.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. It's almost like what I say to my clients sometimes is that we are more sophisticated versions of a car. Cars now have software, they have hardware, and when there's a problem with the car, we would say that's the symptom, but that symptom is generally not the reason for the symptom. It's something underneath the hood of the engine, deep in the bowels of the engine. There's a hose that's become cracked or loose, and it might be spraying some kind of liquid onto something hot, and now you get smoke. So the smoke is the symptom, but it's not really the problem.
Mm. And indeed, we have within our heads, as we call it, the most powerful, if we could liken our mind, our brain to being a computer, the power of our mind to do things for us. And the whole area of, the subconscious, unconscious, subconscious, can you maybe speak to that for us for a moment?
Well, I suppose I would take like a quantum physicist's outlook on the universe, that everything is happening simultaneously, right? That time is an illusion, that there are other aspects of our existence on this planet that are probably an illusion. I believe everything is real, everything. And this is the reason why the placebo effect behaves the way it does. And that our mind is the centerpiece of this experience that we're having. And that if our mind really believes and really grasps a particular truth, that often comes true. So if somebody really believes that they're unlucky, they tend to have that experience. Mm-hmm. If they really believe that they're on the other side of the equation very lucky, that tends to be their experience. Mm-hmm. And for me, this would be crystallized in the ancient wisdom of the law of correspondence from the Hermetic principles, as above, so below, as within, so without. I would say right now, with every client with whom I work, I'm thinking about that law of correspondence. They're describing to me something in their outer world that they are angry about or that isn't working for them. And I'm thinking, what is it inside of you that's creating that mirror image reflection? And what this does is it gives that person the agency. It gives them the power, because if they can change what's inside, then they will have a different reflection on the outside. Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question?
So whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're correct.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, your work entails a lot of spirituality and reference to let's say the physical, reference to beyond the physical. Mm-hmm. Maybe could you speak to that for us for a moment?
Sure. So back to the whole concept of quantum physics, that there is no time. Yeah. To me, it's obvious to me from the work that I've been doing, from what I've read, from the people that I've listened to, that our consciousness survives our physical death. That our consciousness never dies. That's the energy that is created but never destroyed. And that we come into this lifetime, and those of us with children could say, oh, in my case, I have 3 children. All 3 of them had distinct and different aspects to their personality, things that they were afraid of, things that they were drawn to, things that they were good at. And I would say that is in part due to their experiences in previous lifetimes. And in my practice, as we mentioned before, I'm always looking for the root cause. And when I have a client in hypnosis, or when I have them using an idiomotor tool, and I have the client go to the origin of their issue, of their symptom in this lifetime, maybe 70% of the time, 60, 70% of the time, it's in a past lifetime. So that's an example of a spiritual aspect, I would say, that we transcend from being incarnated, as Peter and as Aidan in this lifetime. There's a period of spiritual awareness when we don't have a body anymore, but we still have consciousness. And then there's another lifetime that we would call a past lifetime. And then I think that this is overseen by loving entities that a religious person, I think, might identify, if you're Christian, as Jesus, as Mary, as the saints, as the angels, as God. If you're from a different religion, you might have different names for your spiritual deities. But I think that that's true. I think we're operating inside a much larger system.
So our consciousness is immutable.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. And I would say that, Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage, all the men and women are merely players. And I think that's exactly right. I think we are all like actors. You're playing the role of Aidan, the X-year-old Irishman, and I'm playing the role of Peter, the 62-year-old American, with my history and my background, just like a good actor does. They take the script and then they fill in their mind the backstory so that their character can be richer. But we've played other roles before too. And that our ego and our body and our story in this life is the role we're playing now. And the actor, if you will, in this metaphor, is our spirit. The actor is our soul that goes from role to role to role, from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime.
And so how do we, as it were, or can we ensure that the role we're partaking in is the correct role for us, if that makes sense?
Well, I think by definition, it's the correct role because we live in a free will universe. And we have agency as a non-physical spiritual being before we're incarnated. And we incarnate based upon whatever lesson it is that we're supposed to learn for this lifetime. And upon a consultation and advice with these loving beings, our spirit guides and so on, we take on certain kinds of challenges and other aspects of this incarnation so that we can learn the underlying lesson. So I think we have chosen. I think the key is to remember this, to remember why we're here, to remember that we are eternal beings, to remember that everything is organized around love and choice and forgiveness. So that for people who are in states of chronic anxiety, for people who are in states of chronic low self-esteem, for people who have a string of broken relationships behind them, for people who have done things in the past for which they cannot forgive themselves, this philosophy, this way of understanding and being, offers freedom from all of that. That hypnosis in many ways, I've said to my clients, is kind of like psychedelics. That it can help the person step out of the biography for a moment and look back at their life with a greater sense of objectivity and be able to recognize, perhaps, that their struggles don't define them. And whether it's meditation or hypnosis or psychedelics or prayer, when you can separate even for a moment from that egoic sense that's holding on, and you can see that you're larger, more beautiful, more powerful, I think throughout the ages, we know that this has offered people relief.
So you can find, the solution inside yourself, but at the same time, it's necessary to go to the metaphysical, go to beyond the physical, because it's been the beyond the physical that you gain knowledge. Would you agree?
I would totally agree with that. Yeah, and I think that that's exactly what Einstein said when he said, if you want to solve a problem, you can't solve it at the level at which it was created. You have to go up a level.
Yeah. Now, your work, a lot of your work, well, I'm saying a lot of your work, but you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. You do a lot of past life regression, and you mentioned also, the role on your website of near-death experience and the spiritual regression. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. And you probably know this as a hypnotist yourself, that there are certain techniques that we're taught to regress someone back in time. So the first thing that I was taught was how to age regress someone. So if somebody's 45 years old and they had a trauma when they were 5 years old, how to regress them to that age in order to resolve the trauma where it lives. Well, it's the same thing with past life regression. It's the same technique to bring somebody into an earlier lifetime. And if somebody suffered a significant trauma in a past lifetime, and that's the reason why they have a fear of getting on an aircraft or speaking in public or driving over a bridge, then any other attempt to fix that, in my opinion, is bound to not succeed fully. Just like if you don't get to the root cause of a problem with your car, you're dealing with kind of a Band-Aid. And it's the same thing in terms of age regression, past life regression, with spiritual regression. Being able to regress someone to meeting with their spirit council, regress them to a moment at which they were choosing the circumstances of this lifetime. Those would all be, in principle, the same way of doing things.
Something that occurs to me, Peter, going to the spirit guide, how does one differentiate between a good spirit guide and a not good spirit guide?
That's a great question. And I'm not exactly sure why this is, but when I bring somebody to a spirit guide, I have them ask, are you my spirit guide? Are you here for my highest and best interests? Right? So it's 90% of the time they hear yes. 10% of the time, I'm just making these numbers up, they hear no.
Right.
And then we say, well, who are you? Why are you here?
Yeah.
And that leads to other realms, other avenues that we don't want any part of, really.
Yeah. Absolutely not. No.
And then the other way of doing this is that if a person is let's say if a person's a Christian, their spirit guide, we can just have them meet with Jesus. We can have them meet with Mary. And then we don't really need to go through are you here for my highest and best interests?
Okay.
Now, the other thing I would say, Aidan, is that when a person meets with their spirit guide, 90 some odd % of the time, and I ask them, how do you feel in the presence of this being? They usually say, I feel totally comfortable. I feel like I've known this being forever. I feel cared for. I feel protected. This is another layer that I think we often leave out is, what is your body telling you? You know, when you're walking down an alley at night and you hear footsteps behind you, your body is telling you, this may not be safe. The hair stands up on the back of your neck and you start to go into this on guard place. Mm-hmm. Conversely, if you're on a beach and it's warm and you feel the sun on your skin, your body tends to relax because your body's always speaking to you. So there are different ways of ensuring that the path you're walking down is safe, that it is in your highest and best interests.
Yes.
It's a very good question, because we do live in a universe of dark and light.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's important. And to be comfortable in the situation that you find yourself.
Yes. You want to be sure that if you're a client, that you're comfortable with the hypnotist with whom you're working.
Yeah.
And then once you go into these other realms, you want to be comfortable that in those realms. Yeah. Even if you have to confront something very difficult from the past, you want to feel like you're supported on the physical plane by the hypnotist, mm-hmm. but also on the non-physical plane by your spirit guide or by an ascended master, for example.
Okay. Now, you mentioned previously that you were in business. I think you said a security firm. Is that correct?
I had a security guard company, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I presume, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, presuming that, because of your involvement in business before, to what extent was that the impetus for you to write your published book entitled Becoming the Customer?
Well, so for most of my career, I was involved in sales in one way or another. And the way that I got into the security guard business was that I met a person who became my business partner. He had inherited this business from his father, and it had dwindled down to just a couple of clients and really not enough revenue to keep it going. And I wanted to own part of a business. So I joined him, bringing with me sales experience. And I then tripled the size of the company, and I bought him down to 5%, and I ran it. So the main skill that I brought to that was sales. I sold that business. I bought a small shipping and packing store thinking I could just put this on autopilot. That was not the case. I was basically defrauded, and a little embarrassing, but true. And I was able to build that business up more, but not enough to really, keep things going economically for my family. So I sold that, and then I had to take a sales position in a corporation. So I've got a fair amount of sales experience from early in my career to what I did with the security guard company to 2 different companies that I worked for after all of that happened. And from that place, I wrote the book as a hypnotist and as a salesperson to bring together, essentially, to help people understand the powers of persuasion, to understand how to build rapport, to understand better about questioning, to really unearth the deeper emotional reasons that somebody wants to make a purchase or that they're considering making a purchase, and to be able to sell to that.
Mm-hmm. It's in the business that we're in, hypnotherapy, coaching, life coaching, whatever, it's what do you think motivates people to get off their backsides, as it were, and contact somebody like us?
When I studied this work, which was in 2003, there was a phrase that stayed with me, and that was when they have suffered enough. So that's my answer to that question. When they have suffered enough. When enough, and that's actually the genius of pain. And I'm a human being. I don't want to feel any pain, but pain can be one of the greatest motivators. Mm-hmm. And part of pain is frustration. So if a person's having something going on and they go and try this kind of profession and it doesn't work, and they try someone else in that profession and it doesn't work, and then they try something over here and it doesn't really work, eventually they'll be willing to try something that's more esoteric, that's more off the beaten path. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's what ultimately motivates people, is the pain. And then if that's coupled with a referral from somebody that has worked with me before who had great experience, and they say, you've got to work with this guy, that's where I find a lot of people. And then I also find people that come in through my YouTube channel. I've got 120,000 subscribers at this point, and I have videos, and people have, some people have remarkable experiences, and they want more. And so they'll contact me. Or it could be because of some of the esoteric work that I do, that people will reach out to me as well.
Mm-hmm. And, we mentioned pain and, the power of hypnosis to alleviate pain. Mm-hmm. Now, being in the United States, it's a very, I suppose the world is becoming very litigious, and I like to think, from my point of view, that, that the work we do, to some extent, maybe to a large extent, it is an adjunct to, orthodox medicine. What's your take on that?
Well, I mentioned how I got into this work was a diagnosis on the same day of Lyme disease and leukemia, and that I was volunteering for my local fire department, and I became a firefighter and an EMT. And when I was trained as an emergency medical technician, I learned that there were two branches of allopathic medicine. One is trauma, a person that falls out of a tree, or they cut their fingers off with a snowblower, or they get violently attacked and injured, or medical, and that would be all the chronic diseases. So as a person who has dealt with a chronic disease, this form of leukemia where I was told that I would live for 10 years maybe, and that was in 2003. My perspective is that allopathic medicine is really good at one of those and not good at the other. It's really good at the trauma, fabulous at the trauma. But the chronic disease, I think they're completely baffled by it. And for me, as I'm going to say I'm not a doctor, so don't take my advice. Take everything with a grain of salt that I say. Talk to your doctor, talk to your psychologist. Is that for root cause, cancer, for example, the tumor didn't cause the tumor. Something else did. And the body and the mind is connected. So for me, if it's trauma, it's a slam dunk. It's going to the emergency room. If it's medical, I have way more questions about what's going to work. Now, your point is, what is our role? Yes, our role is an adjunctive role. We are not the first call you make when you have a serious problem. But for people like me with a chronic illness that have gone down these roads, that like me has been told by their doctor, the qualified medical professional, licensed and everything, that we don't know what causes this, we don't know how to cure it, it seems to me that that is the beginning of your journey. That's the beginning of your odyssey. And no one can tell you exactly how to do that because it's different for everyone. But I would say that there's always an emotional component that is inherent in something that has been brewing inside of you for a long time. Mm-hmm. And that from that adjunctive perspective, it makes sense whether you work with somebody like me or somebody like you, Aidan, that you examine the role of your mind. You examine in particular the role of your emotions. Because holding on to emotional pain, in my opinion, is like holding on to physical environmental toxins. It can only harm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you do some work with people who have IBS, about the gut-brain connection and the gut-brain axis. And in my experience as well, I think it's so really, really important that, people realize and get to the root cause of the emotions that are not, as it were, put to bed, if you want to call it that, that is so important in my opinion. And it cannot be overstated. Now, Peter, if you could have just to sort of change gear a little bit, if you could have a conversation with your younger you, what would you say to that younger you?
At what age would you say? So I'm 62 right now. If I could have a conversation with me at what age?
Whatever age, any type of younger you.
Okay, I'll pick it. I'm going to pick 17 years old.
Okay.
I remember saying to myself and other people at 17, I wanted to live a very interesting life. I wanted to do a lot of different things. And I think I was able to do that. I think I would tell myself at 17 to be more bold, to be less fearful of taking risks. Not crazy physical risks, but of walking up to the girl and asking her for her phone number or for a date, or to go on an adventure someplace, to take a trip and go do something. I think I would tell myself to be less hesitant and to be more bold, and that everything is going to be fine. All the things that you're worried about, it's all going to turn out well if you just keep going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great advice. I think it's so important that young people should be nourished and wrapped arms around them in terms of, look, this is how go for it. Just go for it. So what has to be the most difficult part, in your opinion, of being a hypnotist, coach?
I think it's helping people understand that, like if you wanted to get your kitchen remodeled, the first step is actually to destroy what's there. You know, if you came back after the first day of the guys working on your kitchen to do this beautiful kitchen remodel that you're spending all this money on, if you came back after the first day and you didn't understand the process, you'd be horrified. Be like, wait a minute, I didn't like my kitchen before, but at least I could fry an egg in it. I can't even do that now. And I remember that for myself when I was going through my own healing path, that I felt like I was tearing down. I used to call it the Potemkin village of my life. Potemkin village, for those who haven't heard that term, is kind of like a Hollywood set. You know, the town looks like this beautiful intact town when you look at it from a particular direction. But if you look at it from behind, it's just held up by 2x4s. So I talked about, I had constructed this kludgy Potemkin village of my life, and that part of this healing process was metaphorically knocking that down like a kitchen remodel. And that there was a period of discomfort when I couldn't rely on this artificial village that I had created before the new one was constructed. And I think that this kind of deep healing is in some ways like a purging. You know, if you've been holding on to these old emotional toxins, deep emotional, painful things, that as it comes up and leaves you, it can be unpleasant. There could be a lot of sadness. You know, sometimes I call some of the work I do spiritual surgery, because afterwards people sometimes feel wiped out. They feel really tired. And then they feel better. And I think in order to succeed at anything in this life, it's necessary to have a sense of persistence. You can't go to the gym once and expect that you will transform your physical body. You know, you can't say, I want to be a lawyer, so I went to one day of law school. It requires a kind of commitment and courage and a sense of persistence. Like, I'm gonna solve this, because you can't solve people's problems for them. I can't do it either. We can guide them to the solution, like a trainer in a gym. I can't lift the weights for you. So I would say the most difficult part of this work is in helping people understand the need to be that motivated. And to that end, I would say, in my experience, when I work with committed athletes, whether they are professional athletes, I've worked with some athletes in the National Football League, or if it's Division I college athletes, or seriously committed high school athletes, that they already know that it doesn't come easy, that it takes work, and they're willing to put in that work. They just want to know what they have to do. Those are the quote unquote best clients, or the people that understand that aren't gonna be just looking for the magic bullet, the one pill where, you know, I hypnotized them once and now they're bang, everything has changed. So it's that educational process at the front end that I think is probably the most challenging. And I think that that's an area that I will be working on for the rest of my life. How can I explain this better? Yeah. How can I help to motivate people better? How can I streamline the process to support them better? Because I think that's the tricky part. And I think that actually falls under faith. Faith that there's a root cause for what I'm dealing with. Faith for that there's a solution. And faith that even in my darkest hour, as I'm navigating this, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And can I tell you a quick anecdote that illustrates this?
Yeah.
So in the fire department, one of the training evolutions that we would do was they had this giant plastic drainage tube, essentially. And it was just large enough to crawl through it. So in a darkened room, they would have us crawl through this tube. And the only way to crawl through it was to take off the air tank that we wore on our back, to take it off while you're inside the tube. And while you're still breathing the air, you have it in front of you, and you're kind of pushing yourself with your toes and reaching forward and pulling like this to get yourself through this tube. The first time I did it, I was about, 15 feet into the tube. I didn't know how far left, how much further I had to go. And it's so dark, and you're so closed in, it's really disorienting. And I had this thought, do I need to go back the other way? Can I make it through? Now, this is a training evolution. I'm not in a building that's on fire or anything.
Yeah.
And it was this moment of just going, yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Yes, I will get through this if I just keep going. But it required kind of the mind over matter that you were saying before, the mind being able to calm the emotions down so that I could keep going. And I feel like that's part of our challenge as humans in this lifetime. Is so often we embark on something where we can't really see around the next corner. And we have to trust or have faith that if we keep going, we will make it.
Something that occurs to me, how long is long enough for you to remain in that pain?
Well, that's to the individual. That's an individual thing. When they've suffered enough, is another way of saying that, is for each individual. And with alcoholics, they talk about when they've hit rock bottom. Well, what's rock bottom for you might be different than what it is for me.
Yeah.
Some people might, as soon as they get a warning at their job, that might be enough for them to say, I've got to change. For other people, they'd have to lose the job after that, the one after that. They'd have to lose their family. They'd have to lose friends. They'd have to lose aspects of their health. For other people, they might actually have to lose their life and then come back and face the same challenges again. So I don't think you and I can really answer that question. That has to be answered by the person who's going through that pain. And as humans, we all go through it.
Absolutely.
Physical, emotional, spiritual, some kind of pain.
Mm-hmm. Whilst hypnosis is not magic, there have been, I'm sure, and you've witnessed this yourself, I'm sure, there have been many magical moments with clients.
Oh, yeah. And I'm so glad you said that, because it sparked in my mind that while hypnosis is not magic, I think that magic suffuses our existence. I think it's magic that a man and a woman can come together and produce another human being. I think it's magic that in the spring, that a tree that looked like it was dead all winter now has buds on it that then turn into leaves. I think it's magic that you can put a seed in the ground, cover it up with dirt, and water it here and there, and it turns into this beautiful plant, maybe that produces food that you can eat. I think it's magic that you can take an apple, eat it, and it translates into sustenance for your body. I think we live inside of magic. I think it's all magic. And I think the moment that we accept the miracles of life, it is the moment that we become empowered by life. We become empowered to have that faith to keep going through that tunnel, to trust and have faith and believe that there is a root cause to our issue and that we can solve it, that we are powerful enough to solve it with the help that we have around us. Mm-hmm. So I love that you said that, because the older I get, the more in awe I am of this existence.
Mm-hmm. Spirituality plays a huge role in your work, I gather from you.
Yes.
And to that extent, would you agree or disagree that that's what differentiates you from other people in this line of work?
Yeah, especially if you take it on the main. If you say of the main of hypnotists and how they practice. I'm not saying that there's no one else that practices like I do, but yes, I would say that I'm in more of a decided minority of hypnotists, insofar as I'm committed to root cause, and as you just pointed out, I expand into the spiritual realms. That is a key aspect of what I do. That is absolutely key. Mm-hmm. So yes, I would say so.
Yeah. And I agree with you with regard to, root cause. How essential is that to get to the root cause, in your opinion?
Well, I would take you back to cars. Like if you brought your car into the mechanic and it was making a strange noise, and the mechanic said, just turn up the radio. Yeah. How would you feel about that?
Yeah. And then we have the whole area of, people will say, well, hypnosis is all about suggestion. But it's not all about suggestion.
Agreed. Yes. The way I like to describe it to clients is that if we just think about a two-sided coin, one side of the coin are the internal obstacles you have to reaching your goal, right? That you're not good enough, that it's not possible, that you don't deserve it. That's the obstacle that's pulling you back in the other direction. The other side of the coin are the suggestions. Yeah. So if we were to translate this into gardening and we said, oh, we want to put a garden in Aidan's driveway, and let's say your driveway is made out of asphalt. Well, the seeds would be the suggestions. If we spread those out over the asphalt, we wouldn't be very successful because we'd have that underlying obstacle. If, however, we got out our sledgehammers and we broke up that asphalt and we tilled the soil, now we put down the seeds. We've addressed both sides of that proverbial coin.
I love the analogy, the metaphor of the seeds. I love that. I think it's really, really good. Now, is there anything else, Peter, that you would like to share with us that, in your opinion, is something that would be of enormous value, would say, to the viewers and listeners to this podcast? And by the way, I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Well, and I enjoyed talking to you too. So the one of the things that we haven't talked about so far that I would like to mention is, and I'm just going to start with the word parasite. Right. So you said before, earlier in the conversation, how would you know if your spirit guide was essentially of the light? How would you know if they were here for your highest and best interests? And we talked about how you could do that. And then we talked about that we live in a universe of light, of dark. Well, I think that there are not only physical parasites that are way more widespread than our system gives credence to, but there are also energetic parasites. And a big part of my work is working with each client and screening them to find out if they have any spiritual parasites attached to them. Because if they do, these energetic parasites can sort of influence how that person feels, how they think. So for example, after clearing these things out, I've had people say to me, I don't have that negative voice in my head anymore that's telling me that I'm no good. Yeah. And that that there are ways that you can test for yourself to see if you have anything like this. I mentioned an idiomotor tool. I'm not sure if you use them, but I have my clients use a pendulum, which looks like this, very simple. Okay. And that pendulum, when you use it properly, the person holding it can establish the motion for yes, the motion for no, the motion for maybe. And I have them use this tool to determine all sorts of things, including root cause. And it's very accurate. It's an example of your body speaking to you. The pendulum is basically an amplifier. It's amplifying what your body's always telling you. And so for people to have, if they don't already, an awareness that that they could have, say, spiritual attachments that could be influencing them, I think is for some people it might be like, oh wow, I never even thought about that. That voice in my head, it might not be mine. That might be the voice of a harsh parent. It might be the voice of a harsh coach or teacher. And however you conceive of that, it's like you're holding on to that energy and it's not serving you. So being able to release that kind of energy can free you the way it did for this one woman that I'm thinking about who said after 40 years of this voice in her head that was saying she was no good, it was finally gone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then what do we fill that void with, if that makes sense?
Well, I would just then go back to that analogy I made before, which is if you think of a physical parasite, right? So you eat some food that wasn't cooked properly or wasn't washed properly. And now there's a tapeworm, there's a nematode, there are all of these different microorganisms that are not helping you. They may be causing you to crave sugar. They may be causing you to gain weight. They may be causing you to lose weight. They may be causing skin rashes. Consult your doctor. Don't listen to me. That when you eradicate those, what is that vacuum filled with? Well, I would say it's filled with your healthy body functioning, your healthy gut flora, that in a way almost like fills itself in. So if suddenly the negative thoughts are gone, I think it's filled with who we are. I mean, look at I don't know if you have children, but when you hold a baby, you're looking at the face of God. You're looking at pure love. That's who you are, Aidan. That's who I am. That has been infected, covered up, distorted by the pain that we've experienced in this life. And when the proverbial or metaphorical arrow is taken out of your body, it's filled with healing. It may leave a scar, but the scar isn't painful to touch. Now the underlying parts of your body can function the way they were designed to function.
Good. And to what extent are we talking about, or are we talking about getting out of our own way? If that makes sense.
It does. And the way I interpret that statement is that we hold on to negative patterns. So we might learn as a child that money doesn't grow on trees, that it's hard to earn money, that it isn't right or isn't good to have a certain amount of money and more. So in that sense, that imposed belief would be getting in our way.
Yeah.
If our desire was to move out of poverty or to move out of struggle with finances. So it's not, we're always taught it's a question of will, or that there's something wrong with us, that we can't do that. And I think it's probably the way you do, that it's programming that's holding us back. And that to get out of our own way, we have to understand that and to resolve that programming so it's not pulling us in the direction that we don't want to go in. So for that woman that had that voice in her head for 40 years telling her she was no good, that was getting her in her way. She wasn't really getting in her way.
Yeah.
If you have a broken leg and you want to be an athlete, that's getting in your way. But healing the leg, you see what I mean? So one of them, I think, is people get mad at themselves. They get angry at themselves, which just compounds the problem. Versus employing compassion and saying, what part of me believes that I don't deserve this? What part of me is wounded and can't do this? What part of me believes it's not possible? So rather than having a struggle between these two parts of you, it's saying, oh, this part is hurt. this part has got a broken leg. Let's fix that leg. And once we do, both parts, conscious and subconscious, can move in the same direction.
Excellent. I love the way you answer that. And something that occurs to me is, what am I not aware of that if I was aware of this, that I could be much better, or that, I could leave. Again, it's all about leaving the physical and going to somewhere else and see it from a different perspective. And because perspective is so important.
Yes, it is. It's vital. It's vital. And we have, by dint of being in a physical body, an extremely limited perspective. So to illustrate this from a scientific standpoint, if I were to ask you or anyone else, what percentage of the light spectrum can you see with your physical eyes?
Yeah.
And obviously the light spectrum is made up of many different components. So visible light and X-ray and gamma ray and infrared and near infrared. The answer to that question is 0.0035%. If that's not a narrow perspective, I don't know what is.
Yeah. And in the work that we do as therapists, hypnotherapists, we expand that awareness and we open up, that foveal vision into broad spectrum viewing, so that we can take on board all that is available to us. Because oftentimes, as you know, that we're limited by what we think is available to us. So finally, Peter, is there any finally words of advice or that give us the benefits of your wisdom, please?
Well, I guess it would be two things come to mind. One is a reiteration that whatever anyone who's watching this right now might be struggling with, that there is a root cause, and that your job is to find and then resolve that root cause.
Excellent. Yeah.
And that you're not alone, that there are other humans on this planet, and we all need help, all of us, in different ways. And that whether it's you or me or somebody I don't even know, there are people that can help you along your path. And there's not one person that's the guru that's going to solve everything. That it's probably a series of people that will behave like helpers or physical guides along that path. And that, for me, ultimately, I think it's important to have some kind of internal relationship with something greater than you. And that the more you cultivate this relationship, the stronger that cord is. And the more you feel like, the more you know that can't be taken from you, no matter what happens. We have relationships that end. We have jobs that end. We have financial circumstances. We have health crises. We lose people that we love who die. We face our own mortality. And I think navigating this decidedly challenging path with something connected to something larger that can't be taken from you is essential. That when somebody that you love goes out of your life, they cannot take the love away from you because they never gave it to you in the first place. They just triggered it. You released all those feelings inside of you. So how can you learn to do this on your own so that when you walk into the world, you don't feel needy, you feel full?
Excellent. So how can we contact you?
Through my website, which is blueskyhypnosis.com.
Right. So that was Peter McLaughlin. Thank you so much, Peter. I really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully we can do it sometime in the near future again.
I hope so, and thank you, Aidan.
You have been listening to the Professional Hypnotherapist podcast. a production of the European Association of Professional Hypnotherapists. That's eaph.ie. Why not take a trip over to eaph.ie, where our member therapists are waiting to hear from you right now. Thanks for watching and listening. I have been your host, Aidan Noone. Until next time, bye for now.